because I was like at this golf store.
All right. You guys are ready.
Ready and action.
Welcome to In the Green Room. I'm Kinga.
And I'm Chet.
And this is Martin with Ken joining us as well. And
Hello, Ken.
A secret guest.
Graeme Rankine.
Welcome in the green room. You probably want to get up on the mic a little bit too.
Oh, you have to be right on
Graeme
the mic.
Rankine.
Isn't that what I said? Rankine?
That's
Yeah.
it. Good.
Rankine.
You got it.
Rankine.
You got it.
I've known Graeme a long time through my hikes, and we just have nice conversations, and I realized how intelligent he is, and he's a financial expert.
Well, one
Chet?
thing I love about In the Green Room is that we have such a wide variety of topics we talk about. We have some shows where we just talk about winemaking. We have some shows where we talk about comedy. And then we have some shows like today that are really educational, where people are going to be able to learn a lot of really useful information, how to potentially make their lives better with financial information. Because we were talking at lunch today, a lot of people don't have a solid foundation or foundational understanding of the financial system and how they can start investing and making sure
I would say that nobody has that when they leave high school and college nowadays.
Yes.
Yeah,
nobody,
which is
unless you're specifically studying that.
which is really bizarre. It should be like
It
the
is
first thing you're
bizarre.
taught. So that way, I don't know, it's bizarre.
Well, I looked it up. I think only 24 states in the U.S. actually require some sort of financial course in high school.
And
But
Arizona's not one of them. I'm
Well,
going
I
to bet.
don't remember that, but it's also not required. So, in other words, you could leave high school with absolutely no, financial acumen whatsoever. And as we talked at lunch, lots of people leave university with very little financial acumen, and yet.
Well, I went to a business school and went out into the world, and I thought I understood it, but as soon as I started doing my own accounting, as soon as I started having to get loans, as soon as I had no idea. I had to really dig into it. I had to ask people. I had to seek information because I had no clue.
Yes, and I really think that's true for most people. It certainly was true for me.
Mm-hmm.
I did an economics degree. You do never touch anything about financial. What are you going to do when you get a job?
Right.
Investing. How to buy a home. You don't get that kind of stuff.
See, that's my brother got a financial degree, and he had a house in college. Like,
Yes.
Well, I think people need to know your background, that you came from poverty.
Okay.
You worked multiple jobs starting at 11.
Yes.
Can you kind of fill us in there?
and then
So-
your accent, was it South Carolina? No.
South
North
Carolina. North Carolina.
Oh, and it's good to talk about that too, because nowadays I feel like there's this really bizarre, it's almost like this jealousy of people that are successful. You see it online and stuff, where people like not celebrating hard workers and that kind of behavior. And it should be celebrated. Like, your work ethic was insane. You were telling us you started working at the age of 11. So somebody that has that kind of dedication and had that kind of drive, you deserve to have all the success that you've had, and that should be
Well, and
celebrated.
worked
That
hard
is so
for it.
true.
Yeah, and well, there's just all these people that think like, oh, all these people that got rich just inherited their money. No, most people work their ass off for
Exactly.
it. It's rare that it's the other way around. So,
Agreed.
oh,
I
sorry.
agree. And so we should look up to you and say you're a
So
hero.
yeah, let's hear a
Well,
little
I-
bit about that work ethic. And
Well,
how you
I think I'm more, kind of the normal kind of person. So, I grew up in Australia, very poor background, no financial knowledge in our house.
You had to pay all your own bills. You said you saw that at 11.
My parents were divorced, and
If you wanted something, you had to figure it out.
I had to pay for it.
Right.
And so I got a full-time summer job at the age of 11. I'm sure the labor laws are a little different here and probably different in Australia.
Well, wait, I was delivering papers at 11, so
yes.
it's
There you
similar
go.
but
Yes.
different.
Yes.
So you have to show up to work on time, and I saved the money. That was to go to university. I somehow had this idea that even though most people didn't go to university, I needed to go.
So you just were driven.
I was kind of driven, and I surprised myself now when I look back. Why would an 11-year-old know
Wow.
he was in a deep, dark hole and had to dig his way out?
Because you're really smart, and obviously a professor saw that and gave you an opportunity in London. correct?
Although
You're jumping ahead, King.
Oh, okay.
You're getting spoilers in his own story.
Let him get through high school.
Well, that's actually a good point, because when I was finished at grade 10,
Mhm.
the teacher said, you ought to just quit, get a job.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, there's no way I'm quitting. I'm going to finish high school at least. So I went through high school. I had jobs actually on the weekends. I actually worked in a hotel bar, lied about my age, saved the money.
You were a hustler.
I was a hustler.
And you were saving money at that young age. That's incredible.
Exactly. And
You weren't splurging it, you were saving it.
Oh, no, there was nothing to splurge it on. But, so I had all these jobs. By the time I, was about to go to university, I had enough for 1 year. I'd accumulated enough. I wasn't going to get any support from my family.
Mm-hmm.
So, I had enough to do the first year, but I had to win a scholarship.
Win a scholarship. That's what I would say to my kids, and both of them ended up with scholarships. Because you're winning a prize.
Yes.
Okay.
And you're working hard for it. It's not given to you.
No,
Yes.
it depends
Yes.
on your grades, and not everybody gets them. So I was lucky enough. I did win one, and that made life a little bit easier, but I still worked every summer through university to pay my way through.
So you're
Right.
working and going to school.
Working and going to school.
Amazing.
So, the gist of it is that, I didn't have any, I wasn't wealthy. I was actually pretty poor.
Mm-hmm.
And so, by the time I finished high school, I know nothing about finances other than I needed to make cash. I knew nothing from university. I did take a job in London. I was lucky enough to find a job there. There was an Australian professor who asked me if I'd come to London with him. So I did that.
Because he
And-
saw your intelligence.
Well, he saw potential, perhaps, and a young, hard-working guy.
Right.
And so I went there for a couple of years. It was an eye-opener because I'd lived in a very small town in Australia, a beach resort. Actually, my school had the second worst graduation rate in the state. So,
Oh my.
Wow.
So
Wow.
you're kind of working against, basically going upstream.
But you up the average.
I did a little bit, yes.
Okay.
And it was a big public exam. You had to do that. And I remember that 23 out of 150 passed the test.
Wow.
Wow.
That meant if you didn't pass it, you were kind of, you got a job as a bricklayer or something like that. So probably all changed now. But anyway, I was kind of working. Worked in London for a couple of years, came back to Australia because we had a little bit of sickness in the family. And then
Oh, that was nice. You came back.
I came back.
Who was sick?
It was my mother, actually.
Oh.
She was,
You're a good guy, so you came back for your
Yeah.
mom. That's sweet.
but again, I thought, okay, I got an undergraduate degree. How do I progress? So I actually came to America to do a PhD.
So wait, how did you decide America?
Well, I'd come through here visiting, and I knew an American professor from the London Business School, and he was a very prominent guy, so I visited him, and he convinced me that, if you want to do financial stuff, it's in America.
And
Really?
Why
Oh,
finance
that's interesting.
as opposed to?
Well, because actually the London Business School was, very prominent in finance. There was a very famous chap by the name of Dick Brealey. So I started taking some classes there, master's level classes.
Dick Brealey.
Dick Brealey, very famous guy. So began to kind of get interested in, these kind of things. I had thought about, working in the financial industry. I really didn't know much about it.
Is that why you were so intrigued by it?
I think so. But I really didn't know much. Which reminds you that most young people really don't have much of a clue of kind of what they wanted to do. So that's how I ended up in London. A professor came and said, "Would you like to go to London?" Well, I didn't know anything else, so London sounded like a pretty good place to go, and I learned some things there. So I was willing to take a bit of risk. Again, there wasn't much to lose. So I took the job in London, paid like a church mouse, honestly. It was absolutely, kind of very low paid job. But again, you're learning and you're kind of investing in skills.
Right.
And so it was, so I came to America, did a PhD. I taught at the University of Arizona.
Was your goal to be successful? Because I feel you live in the nicest area in Arizona, the nicest, and you have more than one residence. You're very successful. Was that your goal?
Well, actually, my goal was I was terrified of being wiped out.
Okay.
Not so much the upside, but I just didn't want to end up having absolutely nothing.
Right.
Okay.
Sort of, kind of like some members of our family during the Depression, they were wiped out. So, so this was, God, it really could be bad if, you lost a job or you didn't have a job and you got sick, those kind of things. So it was terror really that drove me, because I kind of lived my childhood like that, where it was.
You were worried about the next meal.
The next meal, where what was life going to present? So that's why I had to, kind of work hard.
Right.
So I had a work ethic, and it's been described these days by a very famous psychologist, Angela Duckworth, as grit. And she was a psychology professor who studied, what was it that made some high school kids successful, despite the fact that they lived in poor circumstances and often weren't the smartest, kind of kids. And so she did a PhD on this. And
this is very interesting. Okay, so let's really talk about this.
So what she found, and again, I'm not a psychologist, so if I do injustice to her work, I hope she doesn't sue me. But what she
I'll defend you.
I think you'll be okay.
He's a trial lawyer. He'll defend you.
Yeah, thank you. So essentially, she said that these young people that succeeded, despite all circumstances, in other words, they had grit. And by the way, if you look up Angela Duckworth, you can take the grit test. There's a grit index.
Really?
Yeah, you can find it online. 10 questions and determine.
Like what kind of questions?
Oh, I'd be hard pressed to recall.
You're going to have
Tell
to
us one
have to
You're gonna
go
look it
and
up.
find out.
You're going to have to look it up.
Okay,
See if you have any grit.
And take it. But what
okay.
she found was that these are people who didn't think their growth was predetermined. In other words, when they took a test, some people, the non-growth mindset people, kind of said, I don't know anything about that, and that's why I'm not doing very well on this. In other words, the growth people...
Meaning they give up.
They kind of give up because they think they're not smart or they don't have that particular skill. Whereas the growth mindset people basically had the view that they could change anything. They could learn it.
Yeah.
If you just put in enough time, you'll figure it out.
And you said these weren't necessarily the smartest.
No, they
But
were.
The hardest working and with
it's
a
kind
good
of the
mindset.
flip side of the really smart, bored kid in school.
Yes, but what they did say was, that's a challenge, and I can master this challenge.
You can do anything.
I can do anything with just enough effort.
Persistence.
And she
is
calls it
key.
grit.
Right.
My
And-
dad would grab every one of us and he'd say, you can do anything you want to do. You're the best. He'd say that to us like every day. And that's where I feel like I've passed that on to my kids because I always say that to them too.
Yes,
Yes.
And I think, that if people come at that with this idea that it's not predetermined, I just put enough time in.
Right.
And now I think they refer to it as kind of anything, it's 10,000 hours. And I don't know who came up with that idea, but
10,000 hours.
Oh, it's the guy with the curly hair.
yes, Malcolm Gladwell. Yes. Outliers.
Yes.
That's
Love
right.
that book.
Yes, Outliers. And basically, he studied successful people, and it turned out, I think in lots of cases, it was 10,000 hours is what you needed, and consistently. If you wanted to be a great pianist,
You had to have 10,000 hours on the keyboard.
Exactly.
A music
100%.
producer.
That's
Yes.
right.
DJ.
And,
There you go.
Well, yeah,
10,000 hours, Jeff.
well, some people are lucky enough to do something that they love. Like when I'm working on my music for 10 hours,
Deep
12 hours
chatting.
in the
Find
studio,
deep chatting.
I enjoy that.
Right.
It's grit, but I love what I do. So I'm so lucky to be like working in a field that I love and I'm passionate about. But for people that, don't love their job quite as much as I do, it really is gritting through it and, getting those 8 hours, 10 hours out of the way. Because I have a lot of friends that don't love their jobs.
It's also getting through that to knowing that there's something better beyond, right?
Yes.
Rather than just getting stuck there and just going, this is the best it's ever going to be, right?
Yes.
Because a lot of people do that too.
And that's why some
That's a
people,
good
if you
point.
really, really hate your job, you should look into trying to work in a field that might interest you, even if you're going to take a little bit of a pay cut. Like if you're working in something that
Yes.
you find interesting and is
One of my-
satisfying your soul.
One of my favorite quotes is if you love your work, you'll never work a day in your life.
Yes.
Oh, I love
Love
that.
that.
And also,
But
if you're,
even if you love your work, you still got to work your ass off if you want to be good at what you're doing. So
it's so true.
it's a revolving door.
So
Well, and it's got to be a field in which there's growth potential.
Yes.
I mean, 10,000 hours being a dishwasher doesn't make you a better dishwasher.
Yeah.
No.
So I'm not saying the name of this couple, but there's a couple that I've been friends with for a long time, and I during my divorce I spent a lot of time with them, but they'd say, "Quit working, quit talking about the show to people you meet." I'm like, I love doing that, and so when I was with them having dinner or whatever, I wasn't allowed to talk to people about my show.
But you're passionate about it.
I
So
am,
that's weird that they
exactly.
try to tell you
I
not
know.
to do
I
it
stopped
at
hanging
all.
out with them because you know what? I'm like, I want to be myself.
Let's hope they're not watching.
Well, also the
You
husband.
know who you
also the
are.
husband kind of hit on me too.
Yeah.
So
I was really
two
hope they're
reasons.
not watching.
They're in a big
So-
fight.
She doesn't know about it.
But
So
I think if you love your job,
Yes.
it's going to be a lot easier to show up, 40 hours a week.
So
Yes.
speaking of
Yes.
loving your job,
Yes.
you have been at Thunderbird School of Management
Yep.
for the last 25 years.
Yes.
And
Big deal.
you have seen a lot of students come and go, and we were talking at lunch
Mm.
that they're missing some key elements of just financial literacy, personal financial literacy. And so can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, just like, I didn't have this background, in my undergraduate or, other kinds of things. When I began teaching, I realized people don't have a lot of this kind of financial acumen that they need. So, gradually would kind of tailor some of the things that I did to kind of highlight a couple of the, what I think is, kind of really important stuff. And if I could say there's many different ideas, but if there was a takeaway from, what we're doing here today, there's really two key ideas.
Mm-hmm.
The first is you've got to set aside money for the long term.
every day, once a week.
Yeah, regularly. And
How often?
and well, again,
Choose.
a long
Different
time.
for every person.
Different, weekly, monthly. And maybe I'll just sort of mention a little example, a little story that I saw in the financial press when I was teaching at Rice University. And it was a story about a Jacob DeHaven. He was a wealthy merchant. He'd lent George Washington $450,000 in 1777. And the story in the Houston Chronicle was about a court case. It had gone all the way to the Supreme Court. Apparently, George Washington never paid the loan back, or with interest,
It's unbelievable.
and his family was suing the federal government. And so,
And that is slow.
yeah, that's it. Yeah.
That
So
is
this
a
is
slow-
215 years later.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I
And there's still one appeal left.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Oh my
so,
goodness.
so I began thinking, well, what would happen if Jacob DeHaven had kind of got George Washington to agree to a 5% rate of interest per year?
Right.
That's what we'd call compound interest. So,
Oh, define compound interest
Yeah,
for
so-
those of us
yeah,
that don't know.
yeah. So the basic idea would be, if George Washington said, "Look, I just need the loan for 1 year," so what would Jacob DeHaven get, or what would George Washington have to pay? Well, he'd have to pay back the original principal, the $450,000, plus he'd have to pay 5% of that, and 5% of $450,000 is about $22,500. So in other words, add that to the $450,000. That's about $472,000, and then that'd be it. But if George Washington said, "Look, I need it for 1 more year, lend it to me, refinance my loan 1 more year." So, how much would he have to pay? Well, he'd have to pay the new bigger number, the $472,000, but interest on that. So 5% of that, that's probably $23,000.
So interest on interest,
Interest
which
on-
means
So
you have
interest
to
on the
leave the
interest,
money
okay.
in.
You have to leave the money in. So at this point, we've got George Washington being only 2 years into this. And then, that'd be, I don't know, $473,000. Now, I said to myself, well, you know, what would happen if he did that for another 213 years? In other words, what is it that the family might be suing the federal government for? So you read to the end of the article, and it turns out it's $16 billion.
Okay.
Now, you know, I know it's 215 years, but the point of this is that if you have a long horizon and you leave your money in for a long period of time, it can really accumulate. Now, I know 450,000 is a lot of money, but so is 16 billion. And it grew over time because it was left in there.
Right.
So that's the first idea. Now, most people don't live for 215 years, but they do work for 30 years. And that's the key kind of thing we'll come back to. That if you put small amounts in now and do it regularly over a long period of time, 30 years.
In the stock market?
Well, I'll get to what
okay.
we put it in. So just getting the kind of the one idea across, and that's the time. Time makes a huge difference. Now, that's what we call time value of money. Now, you're going to need that if ever you get a loan on a house, because you've got to get a mortgage, which is basically a house loan, and you're going to have to understand something about interest there as well. But let's go back to that example. So it turns out the rest of the story was that the family wasn't suing for 16 billion. They were actually suing for 100 billion.
Why?
Well,
Because
that's
they're greedy.
Because they could.
So I said to myself, well, I wonder, what does that mean? The family is kind of essentially going to argue to the Supreme Court that they needed interest at a higher rate. Now we know that 5% got you to
16 billion.
16 billion. So what would it take to get you to 100 billion? And this is the part that surprised me, and why I've kept using this little story in my class. It turns out that interest rate, and I usually say to my students, well, what would you guess? Is it?
Usually it gets a high number.
They guess, some say 10, some say 8. So, and then some, of course, are pretty close. But so, I say, well, would you be surprised if I tell you it's 5.89%? In other words, a smidgen increase in interest rate blows you from 16 to 100 billion.
But that's only with compounding interest,
That's
right?
with compounding
So that's why
interest.
it's so crucial for people that are investing to make sure that account is compounding interest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, of course, the question that my students would say was, well, where do you get that bigger rate of interest? And of course, they learn that if you want a bigger return, there's usually a bit more risk. And then I usually sort of talk about the stock market. So in other words, where can you get better returns? And so the second key message is that I would say to young people, when you're 25 and you're going to be working for, 35 years, whatever, put your money in the stock market.
Chet, Dominic, are you guys listening?
Yeah.
And we can talk about how we do this.
Can $5 make a difference?
$5, anything. And as long as you do it regularly and you do it over.
And you leave it alone.
Dominic,
And
can
you
you give
leave
up a hamburger?
That's
Can you
right.
give up a hamburger?
It's giving up a hamburger, maybe once a day, once a month, whatever, once a week.
Or maybe watch a movie at home. Don't take your girlfriend to the movies.
Exactly.
You're just trying to start fights today. You're like exposing one cheater, and you're like, no, you take your girlfriend to the movies.
So a lot of people would probably say, oh, but the stock market's so risky. Look what's happening today. The market's down. And a lot of people lived through the financial crisis. 2008, stocks dropped dramatically. And that's a bit tragic because a lot of people got out of the stock market in 2008. They bailed out and they never got back in. Now, so let's just go back to that. How has the stock market been good over the long run horizon? And I would say it's been phenomenally good. And this is kind of one of those things that I picked up along the way, and I actually share a sheet with this information. So let me just tell you. The stock market can be pretty risky. So if you so some people have done a calculation. How have stocks done over the last 96 years? And it turns out the worst year was 1931, and as you can imagine, that's
The
the
Depression.
That's the Depression, and it dropped in that year 43%. So that means literally half of your stock portfolio just evaporated. That would be pretty alarming to people.
Oh yeah.
People were jumping out the window.
People were jumping in New York out of tall buildings. They'd lost everything. And of course, what was the best year? Well, it was after the recession, so 1933, and that turned out to be about a 50.
That was the best year?
That was the best year.
And if those people would have held on to their stocks, they would have been fine.
Because it went up 53%. So if you kind of think about that, that's a range of minus 43 to plus 53. That's 100%.
Wow.
So lots of people think, oh my God, why would you want to invest in the stock market? Well, here's the bottom line. What has been the average return over those 96 years? It's been 12% per year.
Wow. That's a lot.
12% per year.
That's a lot.
That is a lot. And so, again, you could hit a bad year, like 31.
1931. We're learning so much. Okay, keep going.
But if you keep it in the long run, there'll be ups and downs.
Right.
But you've been in there a long time. So if those people that bailed out in 2008 had just left it in for 2-3 years, it came roaring back.
Well, COVID is a good example.
Yes.
Because
Oh.
immediately after COVID became a phenomenon,
Yes.
the stock market took a drastic plunge. Now that's only 2.5 years ago.
Yes.
It's what, 100%?
Above that. Yes.
Yes.
Even though that it's recently taken a little bit of a
Yeah.
nosedive, but it's
But
amazing
after
the difference.
COVID, that was March 2020, it really did plummet. But it basically sort of gradually came up.
Okay, so Graeme, can you dumb it down for somebody like Dominic and Chet that don't know anything about this? Not me.
Cut back on those hamburgers, boy.
Can you explain? So if
This part of the broadcast is sponsored by Kinga's Financial Services.
What does an ordinary person do?
Yes.
Okay,
And how? Okay, so let's say Dominic wants to invest that $10.
Okay.
How do you do it? What do you do?
Well, so, you really don't need very much to do this. We were talking at lunch. You could get an online brokerage account, Robinhood. What was the one you mentioned?
Robinhood, there's Acorn, there's Stash. I personally use Stash. It take $10 a week out of my checking account, and I just invested in a variety of things. We talked about indexes, which is kind of an average of a bunch of different ones. I like to look at companies that have the highest employee satisfaction rate, because I think that that's a indication of success, and it's again going from the long haul over the last probably 40 years. Those companies have done far better than just the stock market average.
Like maybe Porsche.
They
Their
were not on
employees
the
seem
last.
really happy.
Yeah, that was not on the last.
I just bought the new electric car, and all those employees at Scottsdale Porsche are so wonderful, and they love the manager, David. Anyway, okay, continue.
That's right.
So if you don't want to get into, you're picking stocks. So if you don't want to do that, and you want to keep it really simple, you essentially buy what's called an ETF, an exchange traded fund, and that fund, you buy a share in it, and essentially it buys the shares in a broad index. So like there are ETFs that invest in the S&P 500, which is
What is S&P 500? Define it.
It's an index of the 500 highest value stocks on the New York Stock Exchange. Well, actually, I don't think it's strictly
S&P 500.
I think it's the 500 largest U.S. stocks.
Chet, did you know that before today?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's common knowledge. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
A lot
Are
of
you
people-
investing in this stuff?
I have a general investment account with Acorns. Yeah.
Okay.
So-
Okay.
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
There we
good.
go.
It's like good to just get started, like Graeme was saying. Like, even if it's $2 a week, $10 a week, $20 a week, just doing something continuously.
Just a little bit. That's
Okay.
all that
Okay.
matters.
All right, I'm
And
starting
And
this
that's
week.
it, really. This is not rocket science. As much as I'd like to charge a
Can I
high
have
fee
this together?
for financial advisory, it's very simple.
It sounds fun.
You've got to figure out what can you afford to put away regularly,
And leave it.
and leave it, and we can get to
Almost
that.
like gambling. It's like it's entertainment money. You're just like
Well, let's not call it gambling. Let's call it investing.
Yeah, it's kind of the reverse of gambling.
And you're putting it, into this index. So you're well diversified. You're not sort of saying, well, I like Tesla cars. I'll buy Tesla stock.
No, Porsche.
Okay,
Porsche.
Porsche.
I prefer the Porsche.
So Tesla can go up and down, but you've got 500 companies in there. And some may do well, some may do badly, but on average, what I just mentioned was the average has been over the last 96 years about 12% per year.
Wow.
Tell us about diversity in terms of investment, not racial or anything.
Yeah,
In
so
terms of
diversity
investment.
just means, one stock might be having a good year, so its stock is going up. Another stock might be going down. And so they offset each other. That's what diversification is.
It
So
also might be risk tolerance, right? Some of the stocks may be high risk, some of them may be low risk, but as an average.
Yes, exactly. And so, what I would say is, when you're 25, 30 and you're young, you've got
Chen Dominic, 25.
You've
Here we
got a
go.
long horizon. And so pretty much this is what I did.
So you might look at more growth,
yes, you're looking
take on a little more risk.
taking on a little bit more risk because you've got a long horizon.
Graeme, I have a great idea.
But it's good to evaluate the amount of risk you're willing to take on because you don't want to be one of those people jumping from a window the next crash. So you don't want to put all your eggs in that basket.
Nobody
If your
that
money
believes in
is-
God would jump out of a window.
There's a point that I'm making, but basically what I'm saying is that there is a risk with the stock market. So
Yes.
you shouldn't try to overinvest and go beyond what your means are and try to if you invest too much in one stock and then it crashes, you're
Yes.
screwed. So,
But that's why he said the S&P 500.
Yes, well diversified.
Well, there's diversified.
And the other thing is, again, you're leaving it in for a long period of time. But let me just, kind of mention.
Well
a point.
diversified S&P 500 and leave it in
And
for
there,
a long
and there are,
time.
and there are, many others. I mean,
But I have a question. Can we do I don't know if we'll do it monthly or every other month, where you give us homework. We're all going to do a little investing. Dominic's going to do it. Chet's going to do it. I'm going to do it. Baby steps, and we'll teach everybody out there as we're coming back and revisiting what we're doing and
that sounds
how it's
good.
going. That'd be fun.
So we each get
Martin?
$1,000 of
Yes.
Monopoly money.
Yes,
And we
yes.
all make our decisions.
Let's see how you
Ken will
do.
give us all $1,000, and you'll tell us how to do it, and we'll all invest it, and we'll
Exactly.
figure it out. It's perfect.
So a couple points. Ken in the car mentioned. He said, when you get older,
Yes.
you're probably not going to want to take on as much risk. So you're probably going to, when you're 25, you're going to put maybe the majority in the stock market, like this index fund. But when you get up, in your 50s, 60s, you're probably going to cut back a bit on the stock market, a bit more on, essentially bonds, less risk, kind of maybe government securities. And that's a way of essentially not, you don't want to get to be 65, ready to leave your job, finding that was a dreadful year for the market,
Right.
and you've got to get a job at McDonald's cooking hamburgers.
So my
And
father-in-law did very well, but he believed in real estate,
Yes.
and he believed in investing in. He'd find properties that were distressed, a really good value.
well, this kind of goes back to the conversation we were talking about at lunch of people that are entrepreneurs of the split between investing in their own business and investing in other stuff like the stock market, diversifying outside of investing in their business.
Yes.
And the point we kind of came to is that most people in that beginning stages, at least, of building their business have to reinvest almost all of their resources into the business in order to get it off the ground and successful.
That
Well,
is
and
a
managing a
form of
property
investment.
is a business
Yes.
as well. You've
Yes.
got there's a lot of expenses. There's lots of costs there that you don't know until you know.
Oh yeah, I was saying it, kind of just broadening the scope that
Cheers.
if there's somebody that's listening that's starting their own
Listening,
business that's not
Yes.
necessarily in real estate, it would still be applicable to them. If you're starting your yogurt shop, you're probably not going to have extra funds to be pouring
Yes.
into the stock market.
Good
because-
point.
Or
Really good
property.
point.
Well, it's like when
Absolutely.
we started the show.
Yeah.
I mean, back almost 8 years ago.
But
starting
once that
the
yogurt
show-
shop is turning a profit, then you should start investing.
But see,
in
here's
the
the
stock
thing, though.
market.
I think this is the important part, and this is what I didn't do, and I think that I should have done, is that even when I was investing all my money back into the company, I wouldn't have missed $10 a week.
Mhm.
And if I
Exactly.
would have done that for the last 30 years, I would have be in a lot better place than I am now.
So that's where there is a little bit of a debate there. So like, how much of your resources can you divert to
Yes.
saving and investing
Right.
while you're in an
And I think
entrepreneurial state of mind?
Graham's point is it doesn't matter. It's because
Mm.
you put $1 in today, it's going to be worth far more 30 years from now than you could earn on that.
But yes, it's just it's something good to be mindful of as an entrepreneur. You should be
This is the
trying to
best advice ever.
set some stuff aside for investment, but
Right.
also be
Something,
investing in
just-
your business at the time. so.
Absolutely.
And
we're
then you
just
could end
talking
up in a
small
Porsche
amounts.
buying a sustainable, very green car
There
that
you
is
go.
all electric, and we're saving the planet
One show at a time.
So that's
That's our
where we
little
could.
catchphrase.
That's good. I like that. So I think it's something everybody can do, and I think one message is, honestly, the stock market is the only place that an ordinary person can get real wealth.
Mhm.
But we don't want to be
You know, if
extraordinary.
you're not
We don't want to
starting
be
a
ordinary.
business and you're not,
Hold on, we want to be extraordinary, not ordinary.
That's why he's trying
He's-
to
Well,
trying
we're
to say.
educating people of all types right now.
I'm just
Okay.
talking about somebody who has a regular 9-to-5 job, all
Okay.
that kind of stuff.
Okay.
That you're not going to build wealth, real wealth, just with your 9-to-5 job. You've
And
got
a
to
savings account.
You've got to be thinking ahead.
at a savings account. You've got to be thinking, can I eke out $10-20 a month,
Yeah.
whatever, and put in that into the market?
Eat at home more, and then
Well,
save that money.
where do you get the 10? I mean, we come to some
No $500 bottles of
Yeah,
wine.
good.
we come to some basic things. Is how do you make sure you've got the 10? Well, you've got to have some sort of a personal budget.
Mhm.
You've got to know,
Budget, that's the key.
you got to know where your money, how much money's coming in, and how much is going out, and basically what are you spending it on?
Right.
And most people, when they do this, they say, "Wow, I'm spending an awful lot on those Starbucks coffees, $4.50,
Ridiculous, right?
every day."
No more
And you-
Starbucks.
And no, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that you've got to know where
Nothing
it's going.
You have
against
to be
Starbucks.
aware. I think that's the key, is being aware of what you're
Exactly.
spending.
Do you know, I had a Starbucks the other day, like 2 days ago, and somebody rang it differently, and it was $7.25, and I didn't even complain. I didn't say, no, it's usually for something.
I think it should be illegal for you to get more than one shot of coffee.
Especially before the show.
Yeah.
It is in every state in Arizona.
So, people could take away one tip. I asked you this at lunch. You said the most important thing is that they just get started investing and get started now, and then do it regularly.
That's
Just
it.
keep at
Weekly.
it.
Oh, we'd also
Weekly.
talked about there's some online
yes.
resources, and we talked
Yeah,
about
to
two.
learn about this.
Yeah.
Well, yes, we want to learn.
Which two are your favorite?
Well, so,
The show, in the Green Room Dot
Okay, there's three.
Monthly with Graham.
but I'm only here once.
That's right.
And
Once
you
a
want-
month.
And you want much more regular things. So I actually did a little search on YouTube, and it's amazing how much stuff there is that's free stuff on YouTube. If you say, what's a budget? How do I manage a budget? It's amazing. What's a 401k?
It's
We haven't
amazing.
talked about.
Okay, I want to know what that is.
We haven't talked about a 401k.
Well,
but
YouTube it. No.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of know what it is, but I kind of
Well,
don't.
there's specifically one channel you guys were mentioning being really
Yeah, what's the
having
channel?
high quality information.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. So the other place, and Martin and I were talking about this. We used it to get our kids up on calculus,
Mhm.
and it's called the Khan Academy, KHAN, the Khan
Khan
Academy. And I was looking there, and it turns out they've gone way beyond calculus.
Oh, it's amazing. What they
There
have done.
is stuff on, time value of money, 401ks. There's a wealth of information. Now,
Really?
that wasn't available, when I was growing up. And
That wasn't available 10 years ago.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And-
And George Washington never had it.
No,
he did not have
He
that.
didn't have the
No.
internet, but it's all free and it's all available. So there's really, there's no need to feel intimidated. You're in your privacy of your living room where you're asking a question. Maybe you think it's a dumb question. What's a 401k? But just look through various, videos. You'll learn a ton of stuff there.
Well, we've had several billionaires on the show
Mhm.
that I'm friends with, and I think the common denominator that I find in all of them that are so successful is that they don't put all their eggs in one basket.
Yes.
Like what you're saying.
Yes.
Absolutely. They all invest in the stock market, like what you're saying. And they have a mindset, I can do anything.
Yes.
And they all started from nothing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So-
and that is the idea of, like, you know, so many people are vapor locked by fear, it stops them from doing so many things. And
Yes.
to have this idea, or just have, we've talked about it on the show before, of just
Yes.
having a larger faith that everything's going to work out.
Positive mentality.
Positive mentality, having that, you know,
Mindset.
What is it? There's a silver lining, right,
Yes.
baby? And
Yes.
that is so important to success
Yes.
and just happiness in general.
Yes.
And
Because
it's-
you're already successful if you're happy.
Absolutely. If you have enough, then you're successful, right?
Exactly.
I love it. I love it. So Graeme, you came from this poverty. You have this huge success now. You're helping others. You're helping save the planet, one show at a time.
Yep.
What is on your bucket list?
Oh yeah. What are your financial hopes and dreams and bucket lists, fun things to do?
Well, you know, I think of kind of the money as an enabler.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't.
Oh, I think of myself as
What-
one, but go
your
ahead.
way.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, say what your wife would say.
So I don't.
I'm an encourager.
On that note, his wife that passed away 5 years ago had something she'd say about money.
Money can solve this.
Yes.
Whenever they had a problem, she'd say, "Money can solve."
But
this."
it was the enabling part. It
Yes.
wasn't,
Yes.
the goal isn't to just accumulate all the money,
That's right.
but it can solve a lot of problems.
Yeah.
That's right. And I'd say that, you know, I don't spend every day, every hour of my waking hour thinking, how do I make more money?
Good for you.
My friend Jerry does.
Yeah, and that's a sickness. Some people are really greedy.
No,
and
but he
some
gives
people are-
back. No, he gives
No,
back.
but some-
He
it's-
helps so many people. He's adopted 15
But still,
children.
you let anything go
Uh-huh.
unchecked, you can get addicted to anything. You can get
He's
addicted to
not creative.
Oreos. You can get addicted to alcohol. You can get addicted to making money. It's a mindset thing.
But all he does is help others. So yeah, that's all he does.
But if it's all you can focus on, I'm just saying it can still be having positive effects on your
Like
life,
Ken,
but still your mindset could still be wrong about something.
One of the things I love about Ken is Ken and his wife, they always look for people to help. And his wife was always, there were different girls
She liked
and
to be a
kids
mentor.
that didn't
And
have
I
a way through
enabled
college.
Mm.
And she'd say, "Oh, I want to help her. I want to help this person. I want to help that person." And they did. And they, you know, put them up in an apartment, give them the money to go to college. They helped a lot of people, and that's really how I like to be.
Yes.
I like to help others. And
Well,
we're
I had some friends that well, still do, and have they're Hasidic Jew, and they are very money motivated. And they said that after they got married, that money is like their sex. When they make money, it's
Wow.
that's
I don't like
their
the
sex.
image, eh?
I know, right? Like rolling around in a bed of money.
Well,
but different, cringy, right? But it's just everybody's different,
Yeah.
right? But I want to go back to your enabling.
Yes.
So, you know, so I think of it as it enables you to, you know, have a little, you know, spend it on the things that you think are important. Now, I'm a big believer in travel, and I was very lucky in my job at Thunderbird that I got to do many executive education programs all over the world.
Such as where? Name a few.
Well, I've done lots in Saudi Arabia, Libya, you know.
So they paid for you to go there.
Yes, and I, you know, teach a program, but I always kind of went a little early, a couple of weeks early, or stayed a couple of weeks later.
But name a dozen places that you traveled to where you taught a program.
Honestly,
A dozen? Really?
Yeah.
I can't name what I had for breakfast.
Okay, just name a few.
Well,
Your favorites. Your favorites.
You know, Czech Republic, Serbia, Bosnia. But let me get
So
to
safe places.
Yeah. But let me get to this. So I was running these programs in the Czech Republic, you know,
Okay.
basically from about, 2006. And I would bring my family with me. And not, you know, my wife and daughter and my son would come. Now, you know, my son came every year. And he once came to me and said, "Dad, you know, when we're traveling these different countries, we ought to see if we can climb the highest peak in every country we visit." So I said, "That's a great goal."
Oh, I love that.
So I said, "Why don't you, you know, do the research? You know, I'll obviously pay the car that we're going to rent, but you're going to need to, you know, figure out the logistics. You know, how do we get to the place? You know, where are we going to get a map? This is, you know,
Pre-Google.
pre-Google.
Do we hire somebody to help us?
No. We
No,
weren't
you
going to
do
do
it
that.
your
All
own.
completely on our own.
Oh.
Just the two of us. And so,
How cute.
So we have literally hiked every peak in the Balkans.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the first one we did was Croatia. So I said, okay, I'll book the flights.
I've heard that's the prettiest place in the world.
It's fabulous, but the
They've got good wine too.
Pardon?
They have good wine.
Excellent
So it's a
wine.
beautiful people,
It's
beautiful
great
people.
beaches. It's and lovely people.
I hear the
Exactly.
prettiest women live there, supposedly.
I don't know.
He was
I
the
can
one
neither
who's
confirm
looking
nor
at
deny. Neither confirm nor
He was
deny
priming.
that
My
it
wife
is
might see
true.
but so that's literally what we did. You know, I'd say we got 3 weeks. Let's go do that.
Yeah.
And so we'd travel all around.
So where do you want to travel now?
Well, actually, in 2 weeks.
Oh yes, tell the story.
Oh,
This is
in
amazing.
2 weeks.
Oh,
In 2
look what
weeks.
it's amazing what he's saying.
Well, so I decided I kind of wanted to do one of these long distance hikes.
Okay.
Now, you've probably heard people do the very famous Camino Santiago,
Oh,
Yes,
big
yeah,
time.
big
the Way of St. James.
Yes.
And, you know, it's a 500-mile trek, through the from French Pyrenees into
Yes.
Spain
Yes.
to Compostela, which is reputedly where St. James's bones are buried. So many people do this, and I actually had some Australian friends do this. And I asked them. I said, "So what? What did you get out of this experience?" I'll get to my experience in a moment, but and they said, "Well, we got a couple of things. The first thing that we got, and you meet many people on the trail. I think they did it in August." So
We met on a trail, so I know you meet
Yeah,
people on the
that's
trail.
right. Many people do this, and they said the first thing is everybody has some interesting reason to be doing this walk. Some they said, it might have been a death in the family. They're recovering from an illness.
So 500 miles of just you're camping,
No.
or you go to a hotel.
No, you go to these pensions because these are the pilgrimage. This is from the. For 1,500 years, people have been
doing this. Yes.
So there are places, dormitories, where you can sleep and get a communal meal, and you meet people and do that sort of stuff. So they said, first of all, it's really interesting hearing why people are doing it, and they're all varied. I mean, some are religious, spiritual, that kind of
Everybody's got
Or
their own
death,
story.
or whatever. It's kind of like
So
Burning Man. It sounds
Everybody's
like.
got their own story.
Everybody's, and it's interesting to hear.
Shit, it sounds like Burning Man.
Not really.
Okay.
Sounds like as much walking.
Okay, so we have 3 minutes. Okay.
Yeah. So, and I guess I'll jump to the last point, which connects to our talk, and that is, it might sound like 500 miles, but what it really is about is putting one foot after the other and doing it a lot of times. That's very similar to the idea of compound interest.
Wow,
Each step doesn't seem very big, but you do a lot of them, and you get to.
I love
And
it.
don't go backward.
That was a great.
And you end up
Wow.
in Compostela. So I'm going to do much shorter than that. I'm going to do Hadrian's Wall Walk,
Okay.
Tell us about that.
which is a wall that the Emperor Hadrian built in 122 AD. And it's only 85 miles.
Only.
That's
Northern
still,
England.
That's still high.
In
Only.
northern England, right on the Scottish border.
And how many days will you be
Oh, I'm
walking
going to
this
be
85
doing it in
miles?
6 days. But the Emperor Hadrian built this wall to essentially keep the Scots kind of north.
Is that 20 miles a day?
About 14. About
Mhm.
14 miles.
So we only have a few minutes left, and we've been so busy talking and having fun. We touched on the number one biggest tip we would want people to come away with, and that's get started now and stick with it. So what would the number 2 and 3 tips be behind that? It's like in
Okay.
closing,
With the stock
2
market.
last bits of information.
Well, I guess the second part is being a bit of research on the idea of, when do people retire? And the experts basically say that the majority of people, or let's say the median age, median, people are retiring at 62. And that's way too early given, what they've saved. And the average kind of person in the age group 55 to 64, so they're just about to retire, they've got $46,000. That's all they've got. Now, what we've been saying is you could have a lot more than 46,000 if you put the money,
Start early
and start early, etc.
And invest it in stock market,
Exactly.
at the 401k.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so they don't have much to retire with, and their earnings are 63,000 pre-tax right before they retire. So in other words, you're if you're retiring at 62, which is early, that's the minimum you can get a Social Security check. A lot of people think Social Security is going to be terrific, but it's very small. It's hardly livable, I mean,
So
if
instead of investing, instead of retiring at 62, it's like enjoy life more until then by doing the investing in the stock market and making
And
the creating
stick
this
with it.
money.
Yes,
Stick with it
exactly.
and make every day count. I mean, there are things that are totally free
Yes.
that are enjoyable, like our hikes,
Yes.
like the sunsets, like the sunrise. I mean, there are things that you can take your girlfriend to do that don't cost any money. And
I wish
instead,
wine
People
was
need to
free.
start thinking of exercise as saving them money because it's preventative,
Yes.
saving you money
Oh,
in
big
healthcare
time. Yes.
and
Big
at
time.
doctors' offices. So people need to start considering exercise as
10
saving
seconds.
money. But the
In
show is
the
about
green room.
wrapped up here. Graham,
So
thank you
tune
so
in.
much. It was
Yes,
a lot of
tune
fun.
in.
Thank you.
Graham will be on soon. Saving the planet
One show at a time.
That was a lot of fun.
That was
great.
quick.
Bye,
Great
Mrs.
morning.
Bell.
I never got